Ready, everybody? Okay, here we go. It's Monday night, 2 days before tomorrow night's B'dikas Chametz, and 2 nights before the Seder. So I want to speak tonight a little bit about a few of the concepts. I'm sure you've heard a lot about about my ideas about the Seder. But I think that under the circumstances where there are a lot of rookies out there who are going to be doing their first Seder this year alone. So I'm going to add a few points on the Seder. Some maybe you've heard, some perhaps you haven't heard. Try to get an insight into a little bit more insight into what's going to be happening at the night of the Seder. The first question that we want to start with is, why are there questions and answers at the Seder? The theme of the Seder is Manishtana, and the child asks a question, and there's an answer. The answer is Avadim Hayinu, but it starts with a question. And then in the course of the night, we try to elicit questions from children, even adults. To elicit questions from adults is also good. Generally, when a person asks a question, Rav Feldman Shlita told us many years ago in a shir that when somebody asks a question, that means his mind is irritated. And the nature of Talmud Bavli, you notice, is questions and answers, very engaging. And when the question is asked, and a person's mind becomes stimulated, and the information that they then take in is retained for longer. So we want to ask, why is it that we ask so many questions at the Pesach Seder? That's a question. And the first answer is obviously that there's an element of surprise. And anytime there's an element of surprise, that's why a joke takes people when there's a punchline. The punchline being the idea that a person wasn't ready for that. When it's not ready for that, that's what causes the person to laugh. Laughter in general is a result of something absurd that happens. The person dressed to the T in a 3-piece suit with gold cufflinks and alligator shoes is walking very, very dignified way down the street and suddenly slips on a banana peel, people laugh. And the reason we laugh, we're not laughing at his pain. We're laughing because it's absurd. It has nothing to do with what just took place. And so we laugh whenever something is absurd. The same thing when it comes to estimating a punchline at a joke, because it takes us completely by surprise. So when it comes to the Pesach Seder, what we want to do is, number one, there's the element of surprise. And we have a couple of very, very strong, powerful examples in the Gemara. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, Rabbi Alexandri once said, Man ba'yechaye, man ba'yechai. Who would like to live? Who wants to live? He's got apparently some secret to share with everybody. And of course, the crowd's gathered because who doesn't want to live? And so when the crowd gathered to Rabbi Alexandri, he said, Man ba'yechai, man ba'yechaye. So the crowd gathered, okay, so please share this information with us. And Rabbi Alexandri then quoted the pasuk, Miha isha chafetz chaim oev yamim l'rostov, detzor l'shon chameros asecha midaber mimri. Quoted the famous pasuk, the pasuk that the Chafetz Chaim, because he wrote a sefer using this pasuk, Miha isha chafetz chaim, so he became known as the Chafetz Chaim. His first name was not Chaim, but he became known as the Chafetz Chaim because of this pasuk. So Rabbi Alexandri shared this nugget with the crowd of people. Said, you want to live, guard your mouth. So the commentaries ask, yeah, well, they all know that. Everybody knew the pasuk. Everybody had said Tehillim. What was it that Alexandria had done over here that he had accomplished here in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Yud Tesam and Beis? What was it that he had accomplished over here where he's simply sharing with them a pasuk which they themselves had read many times? And the commentaries answer that it's true, you can read something many times, but until somebody presents it in a way that causes you to stand up and take notice, it doesn't have the same effect. So by creating a situation where there's suspense, who wants to live? I'm going to share the secret of life with you now. And everybody says, please, please, please. And once he gets them to a crescendo of intensity, he says, Mi Aisha Chafetz Chaim. Oh, there, the pasuk. And then I guarantee you, every single one of those people, the next time they said Tehillim, they came across that pasuk, it had a different meaning. because it was presented to them in a different way. It's presented in a question and answer format. Once it's presented in a question and answer format, then it's going to have a different effect. There's a medrash, we may have quoted it last week, I don't remember, in Parshas Tzav, I don't remember if we quoted it or not, but it's worth repeating, that Yakim Ish Stroros was a renegade during the time of either the Roman or the Greek rule, and his uncle Yossi ben Yoezer, who appears in Pirkei Avos, one of the earliest of the Tanoim, was on a condemned man's horse. And they were traveling next to each other. Yakim Ish Stroros, the renegade, was on a very fine stallion. And Yossi ben Yoezer was sitting on a horse. They were going to execute him. And it was the condemned man's horse. And the condemned man's horse is nowhere near the beauty and the stature of this wonderful stallion read by the upper echelons of the Roman nobility. And as they were riding, his nephew said to him very cynically, "Look at the horse your master has put you on, and look at the horse my master has put me on." And Yossi ben Yoezer said to his nephew, "Well, if that's the reward for sinners like you, imagine the reward for righteous people like me." So Yakim Ish Stroros said to his uncle, "Well, if this is the punishment," he said, "yeah, but nobody was as righteous as you, and look what's happening to you. Look at the suffering that you're about to go through. You're about to become executed." And Yossi ben Yoezer said to Yakim Ish Stroros, "If this is the punishment, if this is the suffering that people who fulfill God's will go through, imagine the suffering for those who don't fulfill God's will." And the Medrash says the words penetrate him like the venom of a serpent. Yakim Ish Stroros then went and he erected some sort of contraption where he put a sword at the bottom of it, and he put a noose. He put his head in a noose, built some sort of structure that would collapse in on itself, and he set a fire underneath so that he could jump onto the sword and be crushed, hung, and burnt simultaneously to fulfill on himself all four forms of Misas Bezdin. And as soon as he did that, a heavenly voice went out, and Yossi ben Yoezer had a vision. And in this vision, he said, after seeing this vision, that he has preceded me into Gan Eden by one moment, this Yakim Ish Stroros. Now, this Yakim Ish Stroros was a renegade. He was a rebel against everything good and proper. And I could almost guarantee you, I don't know for a fact, but I would assume that his uncle Yossi ben Yoezer had tried over and over to appeal to his sensitivities and his intelligence to try to change his ways and return back to Judaism. Yet it was one line that penetrated that shook him up. And therefore, one of the themes of the Seder is that when we're asked questions, we give answers. The question-answer format creates a situation where parents who perhaps have tried in the course of the year to instill various values and convey ideas, there's a chance that it'll penetrate because of the Pesach format of questions and answers. That's idea number one. Just parents, I would like to urge all parents who have young family members, please don't expect too much at the Pesach Seder. Sometimes parents, with all the preparation that goes into it, they expect their kids to be able to suddenly step up into a level of maturity and discipline, which is generally beyond them. A 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 9-year-old, 17-year-old, and even a 47-year-old, there's a limit to how long they could sit, especially if they're not people who normally are good at concentrating and sitting. So it's got to be kept in a proper perspective, and there should obviously be no unpleasantness at the Pesach Seder. And the parents have to be very, very patient with their kids. But while at it, those few moments, there may be like a 5-minute window of opportunity to really instill something. If done with a question and answer format, then it's going to have a very powerful effect. Idea number two, a friend of mine pointed out once that very possibly one of the ideas of the Seder being in this question and answer format is that since the theme of the Seder is aristocracy, freedom, cherus, that we're free, we are no longer slaves in bondage, there's a rule. Slaves don't ask questions. A person who is employed in a way that he's essentially a slave. He does not ask questions. In the military, when somebody gets given an order, you don't ask any questions. An order is an order, and you have to carry out the order. If you don't carry out the order, you start asking questions, you can be court-martialed for insubordination. And therefore, possibly, like everything else that Chazal have done in the outline for us at the Seder, the concept, the idea of a Seder, which is based on questions, is to also remind us, you know what, we're not slaves anymore. If we were slaves, we wouldn't be asking any questions at all. And therefore, everything Chazal have done, there's some sort of underlying idea, and perhaps this is one of the ideas. Now, the next idea here is why it's called a Seder at all. The Seder, we're so used to calling it a Seder. We find other places in life where things are called Seder. In the yeshiva world, there is what's called the Seder of the day. There's the morning Seder, there's the afternoon Seder, and there's the evening Seder. And the word Seder, which obviously means some sort of order or organization, the word Seder is the word that we use to describe the Seder of Leil Pesach. Now, the obvious reason we call it a Seder is because it is in an organized fashion. There are the steps of the 15 steps of the Seder, and each step is very, very organized, and it moves in a certain progression. That itself is a reminder to us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world with a tremendous Seder, even if we ourselves don't always see it. And certainly in the situation that we're in right now, where it looks like it's just random and haphazard, that the virus runs around striking people with just random and haphazard. And we have to remember that there is no such thing as random and haphazard. Every single person who has gotten ill, whether now or in history, or every single person, Rahman al-Islam, has been nifter now or in history, none of it is random, none of it is haphazard. HaKadosh Baruch Hu disguises it in nature, and then we look around and we say, wow, because of the coronavirus, this is what happened to a certain person. Whatever happened would have happened anyway. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if it wouldn't have been coronavirus, it would have been something else. But we have to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world with a perfect Seder. It's hidden from us. We live in an era of Hester Panim, where it's hidden from us. We don't know. We only know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does know. And we only know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a perfect rhyme and reason for every single, to the nth degree, every single thing that's happening. We understand that there's a rhyme and a reason. So there's this concept of Seder. Now, I would like to read to you a Gemara. The Gemara is in Baba Basra and Daf Din Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara describes what the table and bed of a Talmid Chacham look like. And the Torah says, the Gemara says, Shulchan Shel Talmid Torah Shel Talmid Chacham Ketzad. And the Gemara describes Shnei Shlish Gedil, V'Shlish Galoi, V'Olav Ke'aros V'Yerek. His table is very, very organized. Part of it is covered with a cloth. Part of it is where he puts the platters. And it's extremely, extremely organized. The table of a Talmid Chacham has a Seder. It's organized. And the table of an Amma Oretz, the Gemara says, an Amma Oretz meaning an uncouth person, an ignorant person, a person who has very little structure to his life. His table is Domet Lemidura. It's like a bonfire. The Kederos Makifos Oso. It's like a bonfire surrounded by logs. That's what his table looks like. He's got dishes and platters and plates all over the place. Total disarray, total chaos. And then the Gemara says, what does the bed of a Talmid Chacham look like? Mita shel Talmidei Chachamim ketzad. Kol she'ein tachta ela sandalim b'yosachama. He has his lighter shoes during the summer season. Uminolim b'yosach yeshamim. And he's got his heavier shoes during the rainy season. That's what the bed of a Talmid Chacham looks like. Underneath his bed, he's got his shoes. That's all. What does the Am Ha'aretz look like? The bed of an Am Ha'aretz, Domet le'otzer bolus. An otzer bolus is a stuffed treasure house. It looks like somebody has mixed a dough that it's so mixed up, confused, cluttered, and messy. That's the bed of an Am Ha'aretz. That's what underneath the Am Ha'aretz's bed. I know there are mothers out there who feel, well, that could be a description of my 9-year-old's bed. uh, in the bed and under the bed. But the Torah is teaching us that there's a concept of a Seder, there's a concept of order, there's a concept of structure. And therefore, in the Maharal, he adds a very poignant statement. The Maharal says, "HaChochma nosein sheyeh hakol mesudar." Chochma, wisdom, demands that everything should be organized and in order. No greater a person than Reb Chaim, no less a person than the great Reb Chaim Ozer Gruzinski, was the unquestioned leader of Torah Jewry right before the World War. And the period spanning the Chaf between the Chafetz Chaim and the Chazon Ish, he was the unchallenged leader of Klal Yisrael. And Chaim Ozer Gruzinski said he was known for his absolute brilliant mind. He had a super IQ, and he could do and think about several things at one time. And Reb Chaim Ozer Gruzinski said that if a person wants to succeed in life, he does not need to be brilliant. He simply needs to be organized. And therefore, Seder means organization. There's a famous story about a young man who went off to yeshiva, and back in the day, he left New York and he went off to learn in a yeshiva out of New York. And his father decided one day to go visit him, wanted to check up how is his son doing in yeshiva. So the father got on a plane and he flew down to the yeshiva, and he went in and he went up to his dorm room and he checked his son's dorm room. Left the yeshiva, got in a cab, went to the airport, flew home. He said to his wife, "Our son is learning very well in yeshiva." She said, "Wow, did you speak to the Rosh Yeshiva?" He goes, "No." He says, "Did you speak to his Rabbi?" "No." "Did you speak to the Mashgiach?" "No, didn't speak to him either." "So then why are you so sure that he's learning well in yeshiva?" The father said to her, "I went up to his dorm room, and his dorm room was organized. His bed was made. His shoes were neatly under his bed. His towels were folded. His cabinet was clean, neat." A person who's organized in their dormitory room, they're going to be organized in their thinking. They're going to be organized in their day. They're going to be organized in his learning. He must be learning very well. And a person who's disorganized in one area is generally going to be disorganized in other areas. You find sometimes people who are always 5 minutes late to everything in the course of the day. They're 5 minutes late to minyan, and they're 5 minutes late to the bus. They're 5 minutes late to the office. They're 5 minutes late to back home. They're 5 minutes late to this. Everything always 5 minutes late. You almost get the feeling had they gotten up 5 minutes earlier, their whole day would have been better. The idea being that for a person, a Torah Jew lives on Seder. A Torah Jew has certain times to daven. A Torah Jew has certain times where he eats. A Torah Jew has certain times where he learns. Certain times where he spends with his wife, where he spends with his children. And therefore, we are built on Seder. That's the idea. Now, very, very likely, and again, I've not seen a source. I cannot quote a source for this, but I have very little doubt that the same way at the Pesach Seder, we're trying to transmit values to our children. We're trying to transmit values of belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hashgacha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu watches over us and he redeemed us and so on. I think that one of the values we're trying to transmit to our children is that there is a concept of Seder. In the way we bake a Seder and we organize a Seder, that itself transmits to our children a value called Seder, and that if it isn't being emphasized, that's something that perhaps we should emphasize at the Seder to the children, to ourselves, is that the same way that we have a Seder now is part of our Mesorah is the concept of Seder, the concept of being organized, the concept of living with a certain amount of organization and forethought. Now, we had spoken a little bit last week about Karpas. I would like to add one point. Karpas, which is really at the beginning of the Seder, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas. The Karpas is right at the beginning, at the very beginning of the Seder. Now it's that quaint little custom of dipping the celery or the potato or the carrot into salt water. I think there's a tremendous depth. My brother once pointed out to me that when you take a look, it says that Yosef's garment, because Yaakov favored Yosef, the Gemara says that's what led to the brothers going down the exile to Egypt. The Gemara says, "Le'olam al yashana adam ben bein abanim." A person should not favor one son over the other sons. And Yaakov Avinu favored Yosef by giving him the Ksonis Pasim, the multicolored cloak, and that elicited the envy of the brothers. Now, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, what material was that cloak that he gave him? And Rashi uses a word which we find in Megillas Esther. In Megillas Esther, when it describes the various tapestries that Achashverosh presented at that party, it says chur, karpas, tchelas. Karpas is actually a material. And that was the material of the garment that Yaakov gave to Yosef, favoring Yosef over the other brothers, which led to the exodus to Mitzrayim. So very ironically, and cannot be coincidentally, here we sit at the Pesach Seder and we start with karpas. Now the karpas on the one hand is that vegetable that we dip in the salt water. On the other hand, there's a reminder here. And it's very, very poignant reminder right at the Seder where we talk about 4 types of sons. The Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, Shkeno, Yodei, Elishol. And right before we engage with these sons and they're sitting at our Pesach Seder, there's a reminder, the Olam HaYeshana Adam Ben Ben Ben. Do not go back and repeat that mistake that was made of favoring one of the sons because that led to an exile. That could lead to trouble. There are 4 sons, there are 4 personalities. And it's always easier to relate to the kids who are more cooperative, to the kids who are a bit more talented. That's easier for parents, for sure. Each child has to be related to as an individual, but no child should be favored over another child. A very, very difficult thing for parents. Sometimes one child deserves something, another doesn't. But when if it's coming from a parental decision where this is what needs to be done under the circumstances, and all other factors have been taken into consideration, that's part of being a parent. But a simple response because we like this child more, or we favor this child more, that has to be avoided. And I believe that here we are at the Pesach Seder. And as I mentioned last week, much of the commentary, probably the son that gets the most attention at the Pesach Seder is the Rasha. And isn't that interesting? What do you think? Well, you should have all this discussion about the Chacham and even the Tam or the Sheno Yodei Elisha. Poor guy doesn't know what's flying. And the one that gets all the attention or the majority attention is the Rasha. And I believe that itself is a message. We never give up on anybody. And how much of a Rasha could he be? If he was a real Rasha, he wouldn't even be at the Seder. I mean, after all, here he is with us at the Seder. So we don't give up on hope. And there's a special way to relate to it. But we don't give up hope on him. And therefore, a father is reminded, parents are reminded, especially the father, L'olam ha'yeshana adam bein ben abanim, and the karpas that we begin the Seder with is a very, very powerful reminder. Stay focused, stay focused. Don't let the Chacham son start to dominate the Seder by pulling out his notebook and saying his Divrei Torah. And don't turn all your attention to the one son who's asking you the questions. Make sure that you pay attention to every one of your children, each one according to their needs. Towards in the middle of the Seder, when we speak about speaking about the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and many Gedolei Yisrael, by the way, when they conducted a Pesach Seder, they did not spend time at the Seder going into all the analysis of the Haggadah, which many people do. What they did at the Pesach Seder is they just very simply went through the Haggadah and told over Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And they just told it very simply, maybe added a few midrashim, and they spruced it up and painted a picture of what it must be like to watch your enemies being chased around bit by tigers and wrapped around by boa constrictors, and what the Jewish people's reaction was, or seeing other people getting hit in the head with hailstones. They probably spruced it up a little bit and added they elaborated on it. But for the most part, the Gedolei Yisrael went through it in very simple explanation, especially for their little children there. And then when the meal comes out, they engaged in the analysis of the subtleties of the Haggadah and what messages are trying to be conveyed. And certainly after the Seder is over, it's the mitzvah to stay up and be Mesaper, but a lot of people at that point will engage in a little bit deeper analysis of the structure and the ideas conveyed in the Haggadah. On the other hand, not to lose sight the real purpose, which is Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. He got it to Labincha, Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the story of leaving Egypt. So at a certain point, the Haggadah says, one who is praised, one who is spends a lot of time saying over Sipur Yetzias, he's praiseworthy. Now, the plain meaning is, well, wow, you did a mitzvah, you spent a lot of time saying over Sipur Yetzias, Hareza Meshubach, you're praiseworthy. You did what you were told to do. Chazal instituted doing it, therefore you're praiseworthy. And that's certainly true. If we do what we're told to do, and we spend a lot of time speaking about it, so Hareza Meshubach, that's one approach. That's the standard approach. There's another approach, which is, imagine you went to an amusement park. Think back when you were a little kid, you went to an amusement park and it had all the great rides, had the supersonic dinner spinner, and it had some sort of a roller coaster that created near-death sensations the entire way, and all the wonderful things that happened in amusement park. Then you saw your friend the next day and you started telling him about it. Or a woman whose daughter just got engaged and she starts telling people about it. When a person is genuinely excited about something, especially when they've experienced it on a personal level, nobody needs to urge them to talk. All we do is got to push the button, sit back, and listen. So Kalamar Bili Yisapir Yetzias Mitzrayim is really an indication. If a person engages in conversation about Yetzias Mitzrayim and embellishes the story and paints in details and really gets excited about it, really goes to town about it, it's not just that they've done the mitzvah, they fulfill the command of Chazal of being Misapir Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's the fact that it's an indication that this person really feels he's tapped into Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because if a person was there in that generation, imagine the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim, do you think they were babbling excitedly to each other on the way out and going over like guys watch the Super Bowl? Then the next day they discuss, did you see that pass? Did you see that tackle? Did you see the guy throw it? Did you see that? Did you see that? And they're all excited about it. Can you imagine the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim? Wow, you remember my neighbor Anwar? I just saw him. I saw that guy. He had so many frogs in his house. And another guy said, well, that's nothing. My neighbor Waleed, he was, what do you call it? He was trying to take a drink and he kept coughing up that blood and so on and so forth. And the fact that a person taps in and feels that I've actually lived it, if I'm talking about it, that means that one way or another, I've actually tapped into the experience and it has taken me at a very real level. Now, one of the things we do is cottage or karbaz yachatz. We break the middle matzah and hide the bigger piece for the Afikomen. And why do we hide the Afikomen? It's not just about getting the kids to take the Afikomen. Obviously, the idea is that if the kids take the Afikomen at the beginning and they don't get the reward till the end, so it's going to keep them up for most of the night. There are communities where they don't take the Afikomen, and there are certainly people who, even if they do have the custom of the kids taking the Afikomen, they don't refer to it as stealing the Afikomen. The Jew doesn't steal. Chap the Afikomen, you can hide the Afikomen. We don't steal the Afikomen. Okay, it's some people, just to avoid, the olam yidabra adam lashon nikia. Person should use refined terminology. We don't want to resort to using the term stealing the Afikomen. On the other hand, what's the idea? So one of the commentaries points out that the Afikomen is symbolic of the Korban Pesach. And what happens is that nowadays we're not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. Don't have a Beis Hamikdash, we can't have the Korban Pesach. So the Afikomen we eat at the end is symbolic of the consumption of the Korban Pesach. Now, there are two ways the Korban Pesach symbolizing, if we could eat the Korban Pesach symbolizing the ultimate redemption and the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, there are two ways that it could come. There are two ways that the ultimate Geula could come. One is the Be'ita, that it'll come at its preordained time. And the other is Achishana. Achishana means we will, one way or another, we can actually hurry it up. We can bring it about sooner through our own initiative. the looking for the Afikomen, searching for the Afikomen, to go looking actively for it, as opposed to waiting for it to come to us, that is symbolic of the fact that we want the Geula, and we're looking to create a situation of Achishena, that we want to hurry up the Geula. Now, having said that, we just have to be very, very careful. How do we hurry up the Geula? The Rambam says openly, the Rambam writes openly that the concept of Mashiach and what will be in the Messianic era and so on and so forth is not something that a person should make a focus of his study. So we believe that the Mashiach is going to come, and we try to strengthen our belief in it, try to make it real. But the idea of studying when Mashiach, analyzing when Mashiach is going to come, what will be at the times of Mashiach, the Rambam writes quite openly that that's not something that a person should make a focus of his study. On the other hand, we would like to take steps to bring the Mashiach. How do we bring the Mashiach? Well, as everything else, we bring the Mashiach by doing the Ratzon Hashem. There are no formulas of bringing Mashiach that we are aware of. Specifically, this will bring Mashiach. Do this, get engaged in this, get the group together to do something for bringing Mashiach. We know that the Gemara says that certain things merit the Geula in the future, and therefore each person has to work on whatever it is area of his avodas Hashem to try to grow as a Jew, and that is the sign of Achishena. We make the effort to grow. That's the most efficient way to guarantee the to engage in what's called Achishena. Another point at the Pesach Seder is we say Dayenu. And, some people Dayenu, and every people sings Dayenu, different songs for Dayenu. And at the Pesach Seder, we have the Dayenu, and it's a whole list. At each one of these things, we say, had HaKadosh Baruch Hu only done this for us, Dayenu, that would have been sufficient. So again, the question becomes, what does that mean? That it would have been sufficient, and what would have been sufficient for? So let's back up a little bit. Among other goals of the Pesach Seder, and among other goals of the Pesach Yontif, is the goal, and perhaps the most important goal, which is the goal that we believe in Hashgacha Pratis, the goal that we believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu running the world with precision, and Klal Yisrael's under direct hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what we're trying to absorb more of on Pesach. Therefore, the idea of Dayenu, Rav Chatzkel Levinshin Zatzal said in the Mishnah of Pirkei Avos, says, know before whom you are going to give a final reckoning. That's what the Mishnah says. Said Rav Chatzkel Levinshin, the great Mashiach of the Panevish Yeshiva, why did the Mishnah have to elaborate? It says, Liftei Miata, Omed Liftei Melech, Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It said, Liftei Miata, Omed, who you're standing in front of. Liftei Hashem, Liftei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We get the point. Why is it Liftei Melech, Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Said Rav Chatzkel Levinshin, the difference between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and any other king, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the king who is the king of kings. Any king, a king of earth, flesh, and blood, is limited. There are situations that come up where even the king can't do anything about it. We sometimes end up in situations in life where the situation looks hopeless. And we can't imagine to ourselves any way out. How could we possibly get out of this? I would just like to remind everybody, we also have situations where we cannot have imagined how we could have gotten into this. As in the situation that we're in right now, nobody would have guessed that because one person in one country ate a contaminated bat or whatever it was, that the whole world is going to get locked down. So the same way we can't imagine how trouble could come, there are situations where we may not be able to imagine how a Yeshua could come. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu could. He's the Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says Rav Chatzkel Levinshin, and among other things that we are going to be accountable for, excuse me, among other things that we're going to be accountable for is we're going to be accountable for all of our actions, all of our inactions, whatever it is. But we're also going to be held accountable for flaw in the belief that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Melech Malchei HaMelachim, which means that in any situation, as hopeless as the situation looks, we are not allowed to give up hope. We may give up expectation, and it could be that things look a certain way we might not have a right to expect, but hope is always there. And therefore, a person has to know that the goal of the Seder is to tap into this belief in Hashgacha Pratis, to remember that whatever's happening, and again, this is why it's so important for us right now that we don't slip into a mindset of thinking that what's happening around us is random and haphazard. Everything that's happening is measured to the nth degree. That's the Melech Malchei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So why are there so many dayanos? Because there were so many miraculous events that took place and so many magnificent occurrences. Each one of us is moved by something else when it comes to Hashgacha Pratis. Sometimes a person is impressed by, wow, I got to the bus stop and just then the bus arrived. And another guy says, well, I was waiting in line at the airport and the guy picked me out of everybody for the upgrade into first class. And somebody says, you're not going to believe this, but I got a promotion where everybody else in the office didn't get it. Everybody is moved by a different type of Hashgacha Pratis. And therefore the Dayanus are there. It's almost like a menu. Here, I'm giving you a whole list of things. At least one of them should affect you. At least one of them should move you. And being that people are made up of different personalities, it is likely that each person, different people are affected by different things. Therefore, it's as if it's being presented to us. Here you go. Take your choice. Whichever one works is good. Take your choice. Any one of these should inspire you and strengthen your belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashgacha. Why do we end the Seder with Chad Gadya? Again, there are certain communities that don't say it, but most Ashkenazi communities for sure say it. Why do we end with Chad Gadya? And you have this whole chain. Different reasons have been offered by the commentaries, but what we essentially have is a chain of events where the father buys the goat and the cat and the dog and the stick and the fire and the water, and it goes all the way up. And then the ultimate chain, the chain reaches all the way up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Kadosh Baruch Hu comes along and he takes care of the Malach HaMavis. It happens soon in our days. Kadosh Baruch Hu comes along, takes care of the Malach HaMavis, takes care of the butcher, takes care of Chad Gadya. And the Mefarshim explained that it's a reminder to us that whatever we see happening down here, ultimately none of it is happening by itself. It's like this chain that's kind of being wiggled from the top with a ripple effect all the way down. Ding, 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 ding. And it's like, and there it goes, there it goes, there it goes. And that we remind ourselves that what we see down here is really a chain that's in the hand of a Ribono Shel Olam, so to speak. And everything that's happening down here is a result of the Ribono Shel Olam up there. That's the Chad Gadya that we end the Seder with. And finally, the Sefer HaChinuch, phenomenal Sefer HaChinuch written by Rav Aaron Halevi. Anybody who's interested, you can look in the introduction to the Sefer HaChinuch where he writes that he wrote the Sefer HaChinuch as something for his kids to do on Shabbos afternoons, that they could read the Sefer HaChinuch. The feature which really put it on the map is when he goes into Shoresh HaMitzvah, where he explains what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu have in mind, possibly. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu have in mind when he gave this mitzvah, and what are the benefits of the mitzvah for us? And this Sefer HaChinuch has obviously become a classic, which is today used as a source for many of the mitzvahs, and much has been written on the Sefer HaChinuch. Yet, in the Sefer HaChinuch and Mitzvah Tes Zayin, which is one of the there are several mitzvahs that deal with the Korban Pesach. And in Mitzvah Tes Zayin, he writes an expression which many people have heard, but perhaps are not aware of the original source. And this is the original source. He writes, why are there so many mitzvahs that surround Pesach and the Pesach Seder? There's so much activity. And he says, Ki ha'adam nifal kefi pe'ulosav. A man is affected by his actions. Means in Yiddishkeit, sometimes it starts from outward inward. If we take action, it's going to have an effect on our inside. Sometimes you hear people say, guy says, well, I don't daven. Why not? I'm not inspired. When I get inspired, then I'll daven. It doesn't work that way. Person davens, and the more a person davens, the more he develops a sense for davening and an appreciation for davening, then he davens better. Then his inside is inspired. And the more his inside is inspired, the better he davens. And he gets into this upward cycle. A person who's started to play piano, wants to learn how to play piano, internally decide, oh, well, there was a bit of progress, I'll bang a little more. Then you start playing the keys and you start getting better. And the better you get, the more you want to do it. In Yiddishkeit, it begins with an action. First, get up and do it. Then the inside will be affected. Ha'adam ki ha'adam nifal. Take this opportunity to thank Afikomen, who has helped the Orsamach streamline. He's put in hours to do this streamline to get it up and running. And we hope that it's been beneficial for everybody. And Lashana Haba Yerushalayim.